What would you say was the worst job in the Middle Ages? Soldier, peasant. What do you think? Let's find out. Welcome to my channel. Today, we ran off to the fields and villages of medieval Europe to find out what it was really like to be a peasant. To put it simply, being a medieval peasant was hard work from sunrise to sunset, but it wasn't quite as bleak and joyless as people often imagine. Life was shaped by the seasons, the church calendar, and the rhythms of farming. So let's break it down. First things first, who were the peasants? About 90 to 95% of people in medieval Europe were peasants. At the bottom were the serfs, whose labor was owed to the local lord. Usually they were bound to the land they farmed and might have to work 3 days a week for their lord. Above them were the villeins and cotters, who had more rights. They could own property, marry freely, and often paid their rent in goods or work instead of cash. And above them were the freemen, who rented land with money instead of labor and so enjoyed more independence. But none of these groups were slaves in the classical sense. They just didn't have much freedom. So how did they live? Well, most lived in small villages of about 100 to 150 people. Houses were small, typically one-room huts with thatched roofs, clay floors, and a smoky central hearth. They kept pigs, chickens, cows, and sometimes a horse or oxen close by in the same room. Peasants slept next to their animals, so they might be rudely awakened in the middle of the night for one reason or another. And the smell of livestock permeated everything. They got up at dawn with the chickens, so to speak. There were no alarm clocks, just the sound of livestock and the rising sun. After relieving themselves in a chamber pot or outdoor privy, they washed quickly with a cloth and cold water, saving their warm water for later in the day. They brushed their teeth with a twig and put on whatever clothes they had. Time to get to work. Peasants worked long strips of land in what historians call the open field system. 1 acre, a long strip about 22 yards by 220 yards, was considered a day's work for a man with oxen. For women and children, the workday was shorter. Depending on the season, tasks ranged from plowing and sowing to lambing and shearing. In the summer, when the sun beat down on their necks, they weeded the fields and made hay. The busiest and hardest season was autumn, when the whole village pitched in to help with the harvest. By winter, their stores were full and the villagers turned to repairing tools, gathering firewood, and slaughtering animals. Women worked constantly too, tending gardens, fetching water, spinning, baking, and helping at harvest. As for children, they helped out too, feeding chickens, gathering firewood, scaring birds from crops, etc. There was no concept of teenagers in the medieval world. You were either a child or an adult. When they weren't working, peasants might attend to their small gardens or visit the village well. They ate what they grew or what their animals produced. Food was repetitive but filling: bread, mostly rye or barley, which was heavy and dark; pottage, a thick stew of grains, beans, herbs, and whatever vegetables were available, plus cheese, eggs, onions, cabbage, peas, and apples in season. Meat was rare, and when eaten, it was usually at a feast. Everyone drank ale or wheat beer. Water was used if clean and available, but unsafe sources were avoided. Remember, this is pre-plague, when wells could easily be contaminated by human or animal waste. The church calendar played a huge role in peasant life. Dozens of feast days gave peasants a break from work. Villagers gathered at the church for services and celebrations. It was the center of their town, both spiritually and socially, when they had free time. Peasants enjoyed storytelling, church festivals, singing, and games like wrestling, dice, or early football. Of course, life wasn't all sunshine and roses. Life as a peasant was hard. Taxes and rents to the lord could be heavy. Famines, disease, plague, dysentery, fevers, and war could devastate a village. Winters were harsh, homes were cold, smoky, and dim, and death, especially of children, was common. But life wasn't without its joys. Medieval peasants lived surrounded by family, animals, nature, and religion. They worked hard, but they also shared songs, stories, festivals, and the occasional pint of ale. Thanks for watching. Would you survive as a medieval peasant? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more hidden history.